welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. We're gonna allow a couple minutes to allow more people to log in and join in, and then we'll get started with a couple Zoom rules, and then we'll get started with our presenter today. So thank you for waiting a couple minutes. We'll get started shortly. Just checking in. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, thank you. Okay. Welcome everyone. For anyone who's new here, we're gonna go over a couple Zoom rules before we get started. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. We do recommend speaker view for presentation, and then video sharing is optional, although we like seeing everyone's faces who's joining in. And then please type any questions or comments into the chat. We like seeing that interaction with our speakers. Here are a couple Autism Tree updates for anyone who's new or just want to get updates. We offer 19 programs. 13 of them are in person, 3 are hybrid, and 3 are virtual. We have 14 upcoming events in March, but check all of our social medias as we're always adding new events all the time. For this week, we have a couple events happening. We have our Autism Tree Project Sunshine Here to Play workshop. It's happening on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. We also have our biweekly adaptive dance for ages 11 through 18 on Saturday, March 11th at 12 p.m. at the Tap Fever Studios. And we have a couple tickets for our for the sensory-friendly performance of How I Became a Pirate. It's a play based on a book. So if you are interested, we have a couple tickets left. And that's going to happen on March 11th on Saturday at 11 a.m. And then we are having our NCL Drum Circle. It's a girls event on Saturday, March 11th at 1:30 p.m. And we have 491 impact videos on our YouTube channel, so please subscribe. And we have 111 Lunch and Learns uploaded on YouTube if you want to see any of the previous ones. And we're recording this one, so if you want to share it or see it again, you're more than welcome to do so. But for now, I will hand it off to our Lunch and Learn speaker today, Tracey Tasker, who is a speech and language pathologist. So Tracey.
Okay. First of all, thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Lupe, can you give me sharing? Yes. There we go. Thank you. Okay. Appreciate you spending your lunch with me. So the title of my talk is kind of a riff on a movie that came out called Autism Goes to College. And it's become more than a movie. You can check out their website, and they have short videos that show different experiences of different students who are autistic and have gone off to college. And I encourage you to look at it, and I want to start off by saying that I'm sharing my personal experience. And obviously that is personal to me and my son, but everybody has their own experience. My son Luke went to college. He ended up going to Oregon State, and he came home during COVID. And then he was virtual for a year, and he went back his junior year. And then he came home again his spring break and did not go back in person, and is completing college online. And I'm going to talk about his experience as I go through and explain all that. So, one second. Okay. So this is a very old picture, obviously. So this little guy in the middle looking not very happy is my son, Luke. And I put this picture up here, first of all, because it's one of my favorite pictures of Luke. And sometimes as a parent, even when your kids are adults, you still tend to think of them as your babies. And Luke is I'd say my most vulnerable child, the one that I worry about the most. It's been a long journey to where we are today. And I'm not going to talk about that journey because it's very painful. And one of Dana's requests for me when I talked to her about what I was going to speak about was to keep it positive. So I will do my best to keep it positive, which is difficult for me. I am not from California. I'm not from the Golden State. I'm from New Jersey, which is more the sarcastic state. So positive is not really always in my DNA. And as I mentioned, it's been a difficult, painful journey to get to where we are today. So this is my family. This is a picture of me and my husband. This was taken in the NICU when my younger set of twins were born. So I have two sets of twins. I have twin boys, Luke and his brother Shane, and then twin girls, Gabrielle and Sophia, who are in the background. They were preemies, so this is a picture of us in the NICU. Luke was not diagnosed with autism until the summer before 6th grade. So things were very different way back when. He's 22 now. And it was not for lack of trying. He had many visits to neurologists, psychologists, psychiatrists. And I was always told, well, he's just an anxious kid. He has anxiety, which he did. He was eventually diagnosed with OCD. But then we went to see a psychiatrist right before he started 6th grade, right before we moved to California, actually. And she diagnosed him then with PDD-NOS. So he was in special education his whole life. As a parent, between my 4 kids, I've been to, and between IEPs and IFSPs, I've been to over 50 meetings advocating as a parent. The phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, it takes an army to raise a child with autism. So I just want to put a shout out to a couple of people here, if they're here, who are part of my army. One is my children's counselor from high school, Kathy Marin, who is my sister from another mister. She has been an amazing support for me and my children all throughout high school. So if you're on the call, I try not to get emotional. Thank you, Kathy. And sorry, Joan, who's on the call, was a college counselor who was instrumental in helping us in this college journey. So before I talk about Luke's journey, I just want to talk about some numbers because Luke's story is personal to me, but it's not a story that is unlike the story of many other parents. So although there are pretty high prevalence rates for students, for people who are autistic now, as far as college students are not necessarily self-identifying as autistic. Fewer than 20% graduate. These numbers, the sources are here. So the first one is College Autism Network. The second statistic is from my alma mater, Rutgers. 26% of adults, autistic adults, have depression, and 42% have anxiety disorders. Only 36% attempt post-secondary education. And those that do, 80% attend community colleges. And as you can see, they have lower completion rates than any other students, including other disabled students. only 40% of those who disclose their disability receive accommodations. And as you could see, a very small percentage disclose that they are autistic. And last, very depressing statistic, 85% are unemployed. As far as California, we are now the autism state. We have surpassed New Jersey. New Jersey is now number 2, which is ironic since I moved from New Jersey to California. As you could see, most of the cases now coming into the Department of Developmental Services are autism cases. So this is on the rise. So my story, is going to be the story for the next generation to come, because we have a lot of kids who are coming down the pike. So before I kind of go through this next slide, I want to make sure that everybody introduces themselves in the chat. I'd like to know why you're here, who you are, where you're from, where you're joining from, why you decided to join today. If you're a parent, if you're a professional, if I begged you to come here, just let me know who you are. And I also want you to put one word in the chat of how you would define success for, let's say you have a child who's going to college. How would you define success for them? I want you to just pick a word, the first word that comes to your mind. What would be the word that would define a successful experience for your child?
We have a couple responses. I'm just gonna read through them. We have Rima from San Diego. She's a professional here, and just to hear your story. We have Casey Superstar from Carlsbad. We have Hillary from Lake Forest, California. She's a parent, professional, and a learner.
Hi, Hillary. Your check's in the mail. Thanks for coming.
And then we have Jordan from San Diego. She's a recently diagnosed autistic person, and she's interested in learning from people's stories. And then we have Liz. She said, I disagree. I want to hear your challenges, which give us hopes. Please don't make it all roses. We have Ricardo Ilko. He has a 15-year-old daughter who has autism. My daughter is in the 10th grade and would love to hear how you manage how to manage Hannah's expectations for college. We have Misty Benson from San Diego. I'm here on behalf of my amazing 18-year-old autistic son. He's heading to college in September. Rima said happiness. Jeff, he's from Seekonk, Massachusetts. Sorry if I butchered it, Jeff. He's an autist. He has autism and neurodiverse self, an advocate, and he's a public speaker. And he said determination. Benson said confidence. Ricardo said self-satisfaction. And then Carol Waldman said, I have a college student, self-advocacy. Jordan said enjoyment. We have so many. We have Jennifer Muckler. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name. She's a college counselor, and Joan Jacobs recommended that I attend. I work with neurodiverse students as well. Thank you for being here. Rosa said independence. I'm Hillary Disson from Coronado. My 11th grader is preparing for college. Hillary said, I'm a late diagnosed autistic person as well. We have Liz. Her son is in 10th grade. They're in San Diego, and he was not diagnosed until he was 8. We have Rachel Martinez, a disability support counselor in higher education, specifically in the College to Career program. And she wants to learn more from a parent's perspective to better serve her students.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, there's more. But
okay. You want to keep going?
Oh,
sorry.
4 more. Rosa said her son is a senior in high school. Hildy said success means independence. Liz said the word I hope for my son is perseverance. And then Hillary said self-understanding.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
So before I really talk about Luke's story, I just wanted to talk about words from autistic adults and what they felt was helpful for a successful college experience. So this first bullet point, I think, is very telling and very personal to me and how I feel about Luke's experience. Retention, academic achievement, and graduation rates are important. However, self-determination, inclusion are more important. So this was a survey that was done with a group of college students. Being prepared for success after college, adequately prepared for meaningful employment. And this third bullet point, what drives satisfaction? Social engagement, support, and overall happiness and well-being. Having the disability accommodations less bureaucratic, including time for students to acclimate to campus. A lot of students felt that the orientation, that was for all students, was really overwhelming. Programs meant to support students sometimes segregate them from the broader group and are non-degree programs. And another survey, similar results. Social interactions are important. Students don't always know how to work with their faculty or speak to the faculty. So I'm just going to spend a moment. Sorry, my screen is freezing here. I'm going to start this over again, guys, because it's, here we go. Okay. So when Luke was getting ready to go to college, a lot of folks told me he can't go to college. It will be too hard for him. Luke is a very smart individual. He had a 3.7 GPA in high school. He had 1410 on his SATs. He was completely capable academically of going to college. This is a picture of him. He received a character award in high school, which is a big deal for a kid who is autistic. And that was from his peers. They voted him for the Homecoming Character Award. A lot of folks told me he had to go to community college first. I reached out to the Department of Rehabilitation for some support, and that was their constant advice to me. So my advice to other parents is don't let anybody tell you what your kid can and can't do. You know your child best. And as a speech therapist working with children on the other side of the age spectrum, I tell my parents this all the time. Luke's perspective was he wanted to go to college just like everybody else, and he did not want to transfer as a junior. He wanted to start out as a freshman with everyone else. I will also tell you, reach out to the regional center. If you're not a regional center client, reach out to the Department of Rehabilitation. They do have money to support you if you go to a California college. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is a list with some helpful lists. Let me put it that way. So I use some of these websites to look for schools for Luke. Some of them list the comprehensive programs that exist to help students transition to college. Some of them, such as Niche, is just a regular college search list, but sometimes it's helpful when you're looking for other things about the college. Is it a sports related college? Is it a conservative or liberal college? You know, there's other things that you might be interested in. Is it a commuter school? So this presentation will be available and you'd be able to click on these links. So applications don't always let you self-reveal your disability, and the California State University system does not consider, this is from SDSU's website, does not consider disability as part of the application process. They tell you you can approach their disability office prior to the end of the application process. So a recurring theme in this talk is going to be don't take no for an answer. So Luke applied to several schools in California. He wanted to stay in California. He also applied to Oregon State and University of Oregon. He did not get into any of the UCs that he applied to. He did get into several of the California state universities, and he got into both of the he got into Oregon State and University of Oregon. We visited all the colleges that he got into before we made a decision. And he really wanted to go to SDSU with his twin brother. So his twin brother and he were best friends. they were inseparable. They had the same interests, the same friend group. And I heard them once talking to each other, and one of them said, "I'll really miss you." Sorry. "I'll really miss you if we don't go to school together." So we fought this decision, which was not an easy task. We had to write a letter. We had to document Luke's disability. We had to prove the case of why he should be at SDSU. In the meantime, we were checking out other colleges because we needed a plan B. So as I mentioned, Joan, who's on the call, was instrumental in helping us with this process, contacting the Disability Services Office and helping us through this. And I'm happy to say that we won the appeal. Unfortunately, in the meantime, we checked out all these other colleges. We went to Oregon, and if you saw that picture, this is a picture at Oregon State, and Oregon is beautiful. It is a beautiful state. And since we're from New Jersey, there was something familiar about it with all the large green trees. And I think for Luke, it felt very familiar. We had a wonderful experience at their orientation. The professors were very personable. It seemed like a nice place. So by the time we got the appeal from SDSU, we had already put in a deposit at Oregon State. Luke had already begun searching for a roommate, and he said, "I think I'm going to go to Oregon State." And I said to him, "Are you sure? Are you sure this is what you want to do?" I said, "I'm not going to tell you what to do because you're an adult and you have to make this decision for yourself." And he said, "No." He said, I need to go out on my own, Mom." And he said, I need to make my own friends and do my own things. And this is difficult. It was very difficult because, for better or worse, Shane always looked out for his brother. He kind of looked out for him when teachers weren't being very nice. He looked out for him when peers weren't being very nice. So I was really afraid for Luke to go to college without kind of his peer mentor who'd been there his whole life. But at the same time, I understood his perspective. I have a twin brother, and I kind of looked out for my twin brother because he got into trouble all the time and always got caught. And we did not go to college together, and he got into trouble in college. But Luke had said to me once something that really wounded me. And if you looked in my soul and saw, there I have some battle scars, and a lot of them are things that have been said by Luke that just kind of confirm my worst fears. And one of them was, he said, "Shane is smarter than me, he's faster than me, and he makes friends better than me." And that was really hard to hear. So one of the things we also did that I recommend parents do is visit the disability centers before you make a decision. And this can be very difficult because they don't necessarily want to talk to you unless you've made a commitment to go there. And sometimes they even want you to have a deposit in before you speak to them. But I'm going to say it again, don't take no for an answer. And we didn't take no for an answer. I called UC Irvine 3 times until someone answered the phone and said yes. And we went in there, and I will say that the director was who we ended up meeting with, and she was mortified when I told her that everyone told me that they were unwilling to speak to us until we had committed to go there. So this third bullet point, I want you to really think about this one. How someone treats you before you get in is a pretty good indicator of how they're going to treat you once you get there. And this, hindsight is 20/20, but we did not have a good experience when we visited the Disability Services Office at Oregon. The person we were supposed to meet with didn't contact us. We sat there for 30 minutes and they told us, "You'll have to come back on Monday." I said, "We can't come back on Monday. We're from California. We flew here for this." So the director begrudgingly met with me. And that should have been an indication of how things were going to be, and they were not good. I asked Luke recently, did you feel that they were supportive of you? And he said, no, I think they did the bare minimum. And one of the things you should ask when you visit is, what do they do beyond academic accommodations? Because what autistic kids need besides academic accommodations is social help. Also ask about the process for accommodations. So sometimes it's a process where it's very easy and the Disability Services Office does everything for you. Other times it's all up to the student. So what Luke ended up doing was just advocating for himself and just bypassing them, because it was more work to go through them than not go through them. Also, you have to prove that your child is autistic, and it must be within 6 months. So that means if your child was diagnosed at 3, you need to find someone to say that they're still autistic, and an IEP is not enough proof. We were fortunate that Luke already had a physician that he was seeing, a psychiatrist, who filled out paperwork for us to say that he still presented as autistic. Also, think about just how accessible it is. I'm going to use UC Irvine. UC Irvine's disability office was in a trailer, very, very far from anything else on the campus. That's a very unfriendly message that it sends students if they have to use it, let's say, to take a test. I can't emphasize enough how hard the transition is to go from high school to college. So look into transition programs. We were very fortunate that Luke was able to participate in a program called Project College. At the time that he participated, it was sponsored by several organizations, combination between United Cerebral Palsy and a group in San Diego called Options for All. Now, I contacted them before this presentation, and unfortunately, that program was funded by a grant, which no longer exists. So United Cerebral Palsy also still has a program, but right now they're not taking any new students, which is unfortunate. There are other programs, and I call them the C for costly programs because they're expensive. So they have programs for summer transition, but they also have full year programs. And as you could see, they are $60,000 to $75,000 a year on top of your college tuition and room and board. So this was just not an option for us. I have 4 children, 2 going at a time to college. So I didn't have another 70 grand on top of that. If you want to see a comprehensive list, I would check out the College Autism Network, because some state colleges, such as my alma mater, Rutgers, has a program which is much more reasonable. And it seems like a very good program because they do have peer mentors as well as academic support. Think about the living arrangements for your child. And I'm just going to read this quote. And I asked, Carrie Ebert is a speech therapist, and she's wonderful. And she happens to have a son who I think he's about 20 years old now, who's autistic. And when I read this quote several years ago, I asked her, could I use it? Because I thought it was so perfect. So I'm just going to read it now. So my son enjoys being alone because this is when he is freed from all the overwhelming and sometimes confusing social demands of our world. My son is verbal and he's fully conversational. However, he becomes quickly uncomfortable when unfamiliar people start bombarding him with questions. I want you to know that my son does enjoy spending time with the important people in his life, but usually only in small doses. So if you ever happen to see my son off by himself, please understand that he is likely doing this to regroup and recharge his social battery, so he can be ready for the next round of questions that are inevitably coming his way. And I loved that. I love that idea of regrouping and recharging his social battery. And I've used that phrase many times since I've read this. And for Luke, that perfectly sums up Luke. He does like to spend time with people, but not all the time. So he did go to Oregon State, and he wanted to have a roommate his freshman year. He didn't want to live on his own. And he did this by himself. He went on and filled out a questionnaire. And, you know, it asked you certain questions. He did not want someone who drank because he's not a drinker. He doesn't party. And his roommate was a very nice kid. I'm not going to say he wasn't, but his roommate was from Oregon. So he came with a group of friends. He also had a girlfriend at home in Portland, so he went home on the weekends. So Luke was essentially alone. So my advice is think about those things when you're making a choice, or when your child is making a choice. Is if the roommate's from the state and it's a state school, there's a good chance they already know people there, and they're not going to be really that interested in helping your kid. So he had a very eventful first year, because in March of 2020, so almost 3 years ago to the day, is when COVID started. Hooray! Freshman year of college, we have COVID. And like many colleges, Oregon State didn't have their act together, and it was very stressful. Luke was very afraid of getting COVID, as many people were. So ironically, I had been there to visit him a few weeks before. I was concerned about him when he came home his freshman year for winter break, that he seemed lonely. And I said to him, I don't think this is working out. I think you need to live in a different living environment with different people. So we checked out some Christian co-ops that were in the area. And that was a few weeks before COVID hit. So he told me that things were very scary at his dorm. Kids had gotten sick in the bathroom. The cleaning crew had called out, and he was afraid. So I got on a plane, and I went out there and I picked him up a little before spring break. We took all his stuff because we didn't know if he'd be going back. And that was it. He was home and doing school online, because shortly after that, they did, you know, close the campus and do training online. So unfortunately, he was rejected by both the Christian co-ops that he applied to, which was really devastating for him. It was rejection on top of rejection. So we applied for a single. Now, when you apply for a single, you have to coordinate with multiple departments. So the application was to the housing department, but the disability support office had to approve it. And they didn't approve it. So my motto, once again, is don't take no for an answer. So once again, we had to appeal a decision. So this was very distressing, because the disability support office should have been supporting him, which they didn't. So we appealed the decision, and we had to get another letter from his psychiatrist. And again, we won the appeal. Now, I have a quote here. We are freshwater fish in saltwater. Put us in freshwater and we function fine. Put us in saltwater and we fail to survive. So this quote, I think, really hits home. And Hillary Crow, who's on the call today, hi Hillary, she gave a presentation last year, and she talked about how autistic individuals find each other. They sense each other in the wild, was her phrase. And I'd thought about it before, but I hadn't heard someone say it to me. And Luke's friends are very much they're not all autistic, but they are definitely all neurodiverse. And they found each other. They found each other in learning strategies classes. They found each other playing video games. And they have their own way of communicating. And I hadn't really thought about it before until I heard Hillary say that. So when Luke got his single was in an apartment, but there were other people in the apartment. But he didn't have any say in the other people that were in the apartment. There was no questionnaire. He was just plopped in there. And that ended up also being not the greatest living experience for him. He felt isolated, ignored. They were even a little hostile towards him. So that was really distressing. And he had already been home for a year online. So when he went back to school as a junior, I said to him, you have to do something. You have to join a club. You have to do something. You can't just sit in your room. I said, promise me you'll join a club. So he said, okay, Mom, I promise. So he said to me, I'm joining a club. I found something. And I said, okay, what is it? And I thought he was going to say, the anime club because he likes to watch anime, or a gaming club because he likes to play video games. And he said, I joined the dodgeball team, which really made me laugh because Luke is not an athletic kid at all. And I said, okay, let's see how that works. So for the first few months, he had a lot of fun. He met some new kids. He was going to the gym. He was eating healthy. He sent me pictures of salads, and he was doing great. And then December, things started to shut down again in Oregon. COVID rates were up, and Luke went into isolation, and he just didn't come out. So this is a picture of a little robot. If you ever saw the movie WALL-E, that's what it reminded me of. And they had these all over campus, and what they did was they delivered food. So Luke never had to leave his dorm, and that was a very bad thing. He became very isolated, very lonely, and very depressed. As you could see by this quote, this is a common thing for autistic students who attend college. However, he didn't tell my husband and I this. He kept it to himself. And I had a friend who lived in Oregon, and he told her daughter that he was depressed. So my friend, who I can never thank enough, went to pick him up, brought him to her house, gave him some time with her pets and her kids to try and cheer him up. And other friends told my son, his twin, something's up with your brother. He's not well. So I contacted Luke and I said, dude, what's up? What's going on? He said, I don't want to tell you. I don't want you to think I'm a failure. So as I said, there's certain things that are scars on my soul, and that was one of them, to hear my son say that. The other thing he said to my husband was, people don't like me here. People don't like me. That just about killed me. Just broke my heart in two. So I said to him, I think it's time for you to come home, dude. We've given it our best shot here, kiddo. So almost to the day from when I had to pick him up because of COVID, flew out there for his spring break and picked him up and brought him home. And I said to him, it's up to you what you want to do after spring break. If you want to go back, I'll bring you back. We'll move all your stuff back in. We'll figure it out. But, I think you need to heal here. So we did. He finished school that year online, and he's finishing this year online. So one of the things to think about is what happens if there's an emergency. This is my beautiful friend Terry. We went to pick him up. But you need to think about if there was a real emergency, what would happen. So FERPA is a Privacy Education Act, and nobody at the school will communicate with you if you do not have it signed. And it's not like a simple thing where you sign it for one department and it covers everything. So I found this out when we were trying to appeal the living situation for him to get a single. Although I had one for housing, I did not have one for the DSS office, so they refused to speak to me. You have to have different FERPA waivers, I should say, signed for different departments. Then if your child gets sick, you need a HIPAA waiver. So this is separate from the FERPA waiver. If your child sees a psychologist, that may be yet an additional waiver. So get those signed as soon as possible. When you're making a decision, think about how the routines are for your kids, what type of support is available, and what's going to change when they go off to college. So, you know, my kid had learning strategies, he had tutors, you know, he had case managers looking out for me, his counselor looking out for him, and then he had me. And I wouldn't consider myself, I don't call myself a helicopter mom. I call myself a military drone. So I'm kind of like hovering above. And then when Luke needs me, I'm swooping in at top speed and I'm there. But I was there a lot throughout him growing up. As I mentioned, having this friend within driving distance was a lifesaver. Think about the pace. So Luke was on his trimester system in college, in high school. So when he went to college, it was not as much of an adjustment. He was able to handle the faster pace. He was also able to take a lighter load. He could take less classes because as trimesters, you have so many more credits that you can take. I would think about the campus culture. As I mentioned, Luke is not a partier. So he didn't want to go to a party school. If sports are big, we looked at University of Oregon, and it's a sports school. Not for him. We ended up leaving halfway through the day during the accepted student day. As I mentioned, think about in-state versus out-of-state students. If it's a commuter school, we ended up looking at Fullerton and Pomona and deciding that they were commuter schools. The weekends were quiet as could be there. Think about whether freshmen are required to live on campus. Is everybody going home on the weekends? Is your kid going to be alone? Do they have an orientation, you know, maybe before school starts with a smaller group of students? Do they have living learning communities? This is where you live in a dorm and everybody, you know, is interested in environmentalism. And what kind of clubs do they have? Do they have clubs that are going to be clubs for what your kid is interested in? Think about how your kid will do without their daily support system. So this is a picture of Shane and Luke saying goodbye. This is a picture of Luke with our cat. Luke is an animal person. Joan, who's on the call, will tell you that Luke probably spent more time talking to her dog than to her. If I needed Luke to respond to my text, I sent him pictures and videos of the cats. So this was really hard for him, and I had not realized how hard it was going to be. So, you know, if you think that's going to be hard for your kid to leave their pets, you know, look into a school that allows, you know, emotional support animals. So as I mentioned, I did a lot of research for Luke. We did it together, we visited places, and no matter how much you plan and research, you know, sometimes research isn't enough. You can't plan for everything. I certainly didn't think there'd be a global pandemic during his freshman year. And I want to end this, and I'm going to read to you something that I wrote in 2019 when he did not get in to SDSU. And I asked him last week, I said, you know, do you regret going to Oregon State? And sometimes you ask your kids questions and you really don't want to hear the answer. And in my mind, it was like a movie where, you know, those movies where someone sees something happening in their mind and it's great, and then they open their eyes and reality is very different. And I wanted him to say, you know, Mom, it was a good learning experience. You know, I learned how to travel by myself. I learned how to be more independent. I do my own laundry. But that's not what he said. He said, I do regret going there. And I said, you know, could you tell me why? And he said, I should have gone to SDSU with Shane. And I said, you know, why do you say that? He said, because I didn't make any friends. So hindsight is 2020, folks. And, you know, the other part of this that sits with me is my husband gets to now say that he's right. And he and I have a joke because we both always like to be right. And he really wanted to force Luke to go to SDSU. And I said, we can't force him to do it. You know, this could be, you know, I don't want him to resent this. And now he gets to say, I told you so. So I'm going to read what I wrote. And this is my little advocacy speech. Imagine that for your entire life, you've had a team of people supporting you. The team consists of many people: your parents, your siblings, your teachers, speech therapists, occupational therapists, case managers, special education teachers, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, grandparents, and the list goes on and on. You've been in a regular classroom most of the time, and sometimes it was a challenge to make friends, but you now have a group of friends. You're 18 years old. Some might even say you're popular in your school, although you'd never believe it. You've been voted by your peers to be honored at homecoming for your kind character. You ace every AP exam you take with a 5. You got over 1,400 on your SATs, and you finish your first trimester of senior year with straight A's. So imagine that you're feeling confident, supported, accepted, successful, and then somebody brings you to the edge of a cliff. Now, they don't exactly push you off the cliff. They dangle you by a bungee cord and tell you to climb back up. You were given no admissions assistance for college by the state college. All they see you as is a number. They have no idea how hard you've struggled to maintain the grades you have. Although the colleges have disability service offices to support you because they were required to by law, some of them refuse to talk to you before you're accepted. Those that are willing to talk to you explain it's all up to you. You must come and prove to us that you have a disability. After you prove to us that you have a disability, you must prove why you still need each and every accommodation. Then after you prove why you need each accommodation, you'll need to take a letter we provide you with and approach each professor individually each semester for each class, for each thing that you want. So with a caseload of 5 classes a trimester, that means you will need to plead your case 15 times a year for 4 years at a minimum of 60 times. That's a lot of times for someone who has a social disorder. I'd like to welcome you to the world of my 18-year-old autistic son. Autism is truly an invisible disorder. To many people, he looks the same as everyone else. He may seem to have narrow interests and be rigid in his thinking, but I tend to think he's super focused and super ethical. He has no shades of gray, which meaning that he doesn't lie and he does not flip-flop in his convictions. Like many other students, he has invisible disabilities. In this case, he also has OCD and Tourette's. For those who joke about OCD, if you had a child with OCD, you wouldn't joke because it is more debilitating than you think. He's not alone. Anxiety disorders affect an estimated 11 to 40% of autistic children and teens, and depression affects 26%. Yesterday, we watched our Reverend give a sermon on inclusion. I thought how ironic this concept of inclusion has been on my mind. The pastor said inclusion means everyone is welcome. I'd like to think that living in San Diego has been a truly inclusive, multicultural experience for my children. What I've come to find out is, though, apparently inclusion at the college level does not include neurodiversity. I looked for what type of support was available admissions-wise for my son and came up empty-handed. There was a wonderful program called the Equal Opportunity Program, which was created in the late 60s to offer admissions assistance to underrepresented students. which may have been prevented from pursuing a college degree. The program was put in place by a bill passed by the state legislature and provides admissions assistance, academic assistance, and financial assistance. It offers outreach, a separate application process, tutoring, and mentoring to recruit and retain students. I thought there must be a similar program for my student. Last week, I attended an honors college presentation with my son's twin brother. The program gives tuition assistance, a dorm for students to bond with others, special advisors, job interns, and tutoring. They even gave templates for writing letters to professors and talking points to use in office hours. I thought, wow, wouldn't this be amazing if something like this existed for autistic students? So here I sit with my son with high SAT scores, a good grade point average, AP classes, political internships, multiple character awards from teachers and peers, and we are booking a trip to Oregon because he could not get into his first 5 choices in California. It will be the first time he's left home, the first time he's been separated from his twin brother. If you look at the advice of other parents who've sent their children, or their autistic children to college, the advice is always keep them close to home. Unfortunately, that is not an option for us. Ironically, we researched the schools that he applied to, and each one of these schools has an autism center. SDSU Center for Autism, UCI Center for Autism, UC Davis Mind Autism Center, Kegel Autism Center at Santa Barbara, Coriel Autism Center at UC Santa Cruz, and UC San Diego Autism Center of Excellence. Unfortunately, these centers seem to be more concerned with research than supporting adults. If you think my son is a minority and this is an isolated case, then I ask you to consider the statistics. In 2018, 1 in 59 children was diagnosed with autism. Like my son, 44% have IQ scores in the average to above average range. Over the next decade, 500,000, 50,000 a year will enter adulthood and age out of school support. Not surprisingly, more than half of these young adults remain unemployed and unenrolled in higher education in the 2 years after high school. This is lower than any other rate of young adults in any other disability category, including learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, or speech-language impairments. Of the nearly 18,000 people who use the state vocational rehabilitation program, only 60% left with a job. And of those, 80% worked part-time, earning wages below poverty level. Now, our family does not qualify for the poverty level, but like many other families, supporting a child with autism is a financial struggle. Even though I have 2 master's degrees, I've never been able to work full-time because a tremendous amount of my time has been spent supporting my children who have IEPs. I know I am not the minority statistic here, as well as mothers of children with autism work fewer hours per week and earn 65% less than mothers of children with no health limitations, and 35% less than mothers of children with other disabilities or disorders. Not one of my son's psychologist or psychiatrist visits over the years of his life was ever covered by insurance, nor were occupational therapy visits, tutoring, or any other of the many people who've helped us. On average, autism costs $60,000 a year through childhood. I think it is time the California State Legislature start an EOP program for students like mine and the other 50,000 a year coming up the pike who need admissions assistance, peer mentorship in college, inclusive dorm living, and job search assistance. In the long run, the money you spend on a program like this will decrease the amount spent on adult support later on, which, by the way, is the majority of the amount being spent right now, $175 to $196 billion a year for adult services. If you continue to support students as they age out of school instead of hanging them over a cliff, then maybe we would not have so many not enrolled in college or dropping out or remaining unemployed. If you rededicate some of the resources from the state university's autism centers from research to support, maybe the students who are clearly capable of contributing intellectually all the way throughout school would realize their full potential after high school. I'll repeat the words of my pastor. Inclusion means everyone is welcome, and diversity should not be limited to race, religion, or sex. It needs to include neurodiversity. Okay, that's my end of my soapbox there.
Thank you, Tracey, for sharing that with us and just learning more about Luke and all the challenges that you faced. There's a couple things in the chat. Joan said, Luke is a superstar. I enjoyed working with him. And then she included her all her info, contact details, and she included you must submit documentation that is no longer than 3 years old since your student is 16 years old. Casey asked, what if someone is conserved? Do you still need a FERPA or a HIPAA? What about the state to state difference with the conservatorship in California? I don't know if you have an answer to that or if anyone in here attending knows.
I don't have an answer to that, Casey.
I think it matters. Some of the, I don't know if you can hear me, but I have conservatorship and it gets, like right now I have to get it recertified, and it depends on what, the length of their conservatorship. You can give up some and not all. I just want you to know that there's different kinds of it. I don't know how many percentages, but there's different levels.
No, I didn't know that. Well, thank you.
Yeah. There's a difference between guardianship and conservatorship, because I have 2 kids severely autistic. One is 17, the other one's 22, aging out of the San Diego Regional Center. And that's why I'm looking for day programs, the behavioral day and all that stuff. He's being reassessed because I got him conserved at 18. I did it in a different regional center because I lived in Inland Empire. I did it myself. It was hard. I don't know if anyone knows the process, but I did it myself with my husband, and through it was a process in which they I don't know how much time do I have, because I have to download information in my brain from what I remember is first they ask for all your paperwork, and they ask for your psychiatrist, the assessment, the school, the doctor, and then they serve other people in your social realm, like another son. I have an adult son. My in-laws, my mother and father, my brothers, and my sister-in-law. And those people, if they had like a rejection towards it, would have to come on the day that he would be asked, because in front of a judge, they also have their own people to assess your kid, even with all that paperwork. And then you go in front of a judge, and the judge asks your child, do you know what you're giving up? And that level in which you do is dependent upon all that paper, all that finding. And then after a certain, like now I have full conservatorship, but I didn't realize that it was for 3 years, like 18, 19, 20, 21, 18, 19, 20, 21, 20, about like 3-4 years later, I get a call, they have to reassess it. Okay, so it doesn't, like, it's not forever, and it depends on the length of the conservatorship.
Thank you for sharing, Silvana. Casey, I see your
Yeah, I have like feedback. In regards to conservatorship, yes, you're correct. They come in a couple of years and they reassess the situation to make sure it's all appropriate. I'm just curious in regards to, for starters, I'm sorry I'm wearing an Oregon shirt today, Tracy, because I'm like, oh my gosh, after hearing how you guys left, I'm like, I totally get it. Oregon, the University of Oregon is probably not this huge school for starters, and it's probably difficult, but the FERPA and HIPAA, I'm just kind of wondering from like a school standpoint, like, do you still have like the legal rights as a parent? Although I work in this field, I am here as a parent and I have an 18-year-old. So do you still have the legal rights and the legal responsibilities in terms of registering and getting information? I've watched families have a lot of struggle, even in California, gaining information in regards to like basic things, like who is the teacher for the history class? Oh, I'm sorry, your child has to ask.
So are you asking me, Casey?
Yeah, I think I am asking you, Tracy.
So,
who else I would ask?
So basically, when your kid goes to college, they're an adult, and school does not have to speak to
Not
you.
if they're conserved, they're not though. That's
Well,
what
I didn't have that situation with Luke. I don't have conservatives.
Right. And so a lot of us do. And the other aspect is what happens when maybe someone doesn't have a 3.7 GPA. What if someone's not as like, obviously it's a success that Luke has such a high GPA. What if they don't? Like, can a school reject them because maybe they have a 3.5? Can we still fight? Like, would it be worthwhile to fight the good fight with a 3.2 or a
Yeah,
3?
I mean, you can always, as I said, you can always appeal. The
Of
worst
course.
they could do. I mean, we appealed SCHD. We also appealed UC Santa Cruz. UC Santa Cruz, we did not win that appeal.
Okay.
So you can always try.
Okay.
And I think when we spoke the other day, Casey, there are programs that just provide that college experience, but they're non-degree programs. Now, for Luke, that didn't make sense because, first of all, I wasn't willing to spend, 40 grand a year and him not get a degree. And he's smart enough to get a degree. I mean, the silver lining and the positive. So, so Dana doesn't ban me from ever being on an Autism Tree event again after this one. Sorry, sorry, Dana. I know that was not the positive spin that you wanted me to give it, but I'm a very direct and honest person. But the positive of here is Luke is going to graduate college. So he's not going to become a statistic for a kid who didn't graduate. He's graduating college with a 3.7 GPA as of right now, and a degree from Oregon State. So it's not all negative. He is going to graduate. And hopefully be able to find a job, or I'll be on here next year talking about.
What was his major?
His major was political science, so he wants to work in public policy. That's his dream, and probably go to graduate school for public policy.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, we have a lot more comments in the chat. Karen writes that, Tracey, thank you for sharing your truth. It's a powerful message and will help many in years to come. Carol said, thank you for your honesty. Really enjoyed your presentation. Doug said, thank you, Tracey. We have one for Jordan. She said, I have a question as a high functioning, though I know labels like that are harmful. I'm not sure another way to say that in the context. Autistic person who is about to apply for college, I am very capable of masking, and even though it can be harder, I've been able to get through school just fine. Do you recommend not telling schools about my autism? Do you think telling them will hurt my chances of getting in?
So, when I talked to Luke the other day, he did go to he registered with the Disability Support Office. And he ended up not using them. Supposedly, they had an autism support group. And that, even just that term bothers me, because when you talk about a support group, it implies that something's wrong, right? When we talk about support groups, it often means that you need help. And Luke was like, I don't need to join a support group. I don't want to talk about, myself, and it's nobody's business. And I respect his right. It's up to him if he wants to tell people he's autistic, right? So I think it's a personal choice as an adult that you have to make, what you're comfortable with. I mean, I don't, and I have to say, it bothers me when people say, well, that's not supporting the neurodiversity movement. Well, you know what? People who are neurodiverse, who have ADHD, don't introduce themselves and say, hi, I'm John and I have ADHD. So, I support my son's decision to decide what he wants to tell people and what he doesn't want to tell people. I mean, I feel like if he needed support, it was good to have that in place with the office. And as far as applying to college, it's against the law for somebody to discriminate against you if you reveal that on your application. The fact is that you can't reveal it on the CSU application. There is no good place to do that. So you can contact, I noticed that SDSU had this on their website, you can contact their disability support office, or they call it the success office, ahead of time before the application process is complete. So that's new. That did not exist when Luke applied. So, that's up to you. I mean, from my perspective as his mother, I feel like the fact that he graduated high school with the grades that he did after the long haul that it was amazing. And they needed to know that it was amazing that he did that, you know?
Thank you, Tracy. Jordan, I hope that is able to help. I know we're going over time, but we just have a couple questions if that's okay, Tracy.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I said, Liz, I said, Tracy, you're speaking the choir to the choir. How do we band together to affect change?
So when I wrote this letter, I reached out to, I don't know, 20 people trying to get something going. And a lot of folks said, you know, I'll help you if you open it up to all disabilities. And I'll be honest, I said, I can't do that on my own because I don't know about all disabilities. So for example, there's a professor at UC Davis that I spoke to, and she had a child who was attending college with Down syndrome. And she said, let's do it. Let's do this. And I said, well, I need your help because I don't know enough about Down syndrome to speak for you. And she says, well, I don't have the time to help you. You know, so it's like, I also feel that, you know, there's a difference between having an intellectual disability, right? So some kids can't, some kids would have a difficult time in college, right? Luke doesn't have Luke, you know, academically, he's completely capable of functioning. What he really needs is social support, right? So it's important that we don't, you know, get to the point where we're not talking about, you know, what is needed here, right? So as I said, what he really needs is social support as well as things that you wouldn't even think of. So yesterday he had a job interview for County Board of Supervisors. And he got off the call and I said, well, that was quick. And I said, how'd it go? And he said, well, they asked me if I knew what the County Board of Supervisors did. And I said, no. And I was like, because he's painfully honest, you know, he wouldn't even try and fudge it, right? So I said, Luke, I said, why didn't you research this before your interview? He goes, what do you mean? I thought they were going to tell me what they did. And I said, and I didn't even think about it. Like, I didn't even think to coach him ahead. Like, so he's not really prepared for the work world and interviewing and, you know, that he needs to do this. He's like, well, if you told me, I would have done it. I'm like, you're right. I didn't think to tell you. Like, you don't know what your kids don't know until they get put in that situation, you know? My daughter stood in the kitchen the other day and I realized she didn't know how to use the can opener. You know, so sometimes you don't know what your kids don't know how to do until that situation arises, right?
We have to front load them. Like I know with my children, and I have children that do have an intellectual disability as well as low functioning, high functioning autism. Like I have one that needs time to process and has limited capacity, but he has an intellectual disability too. And I just found out today that I don't know when it dropped off, but the intellectual disability actually wasn't his first diagnosis. So it's actually dropped off on the IPP. Dropped off meaning it was left out.
So I don't think I answered the question. So I think we need to find somebody who is sensitive. First of all, what I found out, and I'm not a political person, but I've gotten into politics with Luke. So we worked on a campaign together a few years ago for someone who was running for our district. And Luke and I together went and pounded the pavement, knocking on doors. What I've realized is you have to find somebody who's sensitive to your cause, right? So finding somebody who has, honestly, finding someone who has a kid who's autistic. So someone who is going to be facing what we're facing now, you know, down the road, to say, hey, you know, we need to bring this to the forefront. These kids need more help in college, or this statistic's just going to get worse and worse, right? So if anybody has a suggestion on those people.
Well, I was thinking, Tracy, and I know that I came in late. I had to deal with a flood. I'm sorry, but beforehand, and forgive me if it's off topic, but I feel like because you know, we're thinking of the future. And I was thinking, as parents, if we're all in the same boat and the kids can't stay on their own, what is it as a team or as parents that have kids and they need that extra support? And they're kind of like one day gonna be on their own. Are we to open up a place? Are we, you know, could we? And like, what are those things look like? And who do you talk to? Because if you're into politics because I live in Encinitas, I mean, my kid's gonna probably stay with us for like 10 years, but I mean, am I gonna live forever? I don't know what to do. So to me, it's like, I don't trust anyone. He can't be on his own. But then what does that housing thing look like to me?
Mhm.
So, I mean, and as parents, the responsibility is, what am I gonna feel comfortable with? A community that kind of supports that whole thing. Because some of these places, from what I see, like in Oregon, and I believe it's in, you know, Sweetwater, it looks like almost like a senior home, you know, and
Yeah.
they have everything there. So the kids can, you know, depending on the functionality, of course, you know, they can do like gardening, cooking, you know, some of them can go to a job site, you know, a job. So I was wondering, could we start that? Because it kind of feels like there's so many of us and so many different supports we need, but we're all have the same kind of want for our children for the future, you know, whether or not they're capable of getting a college degree or not. I feel like I don't know what to do and where to start and who to say and who to call and say, can we start this? Because it looks like there's nothing in North County, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Well, everyone, we have a couple of saying thank you, Tracy, for all that info shared. And we have Rima, this is incredible moving. You are a true champion for a child and are paving the way for individuals to follow. Thank you. If anyone has any last minute comments or questions for Tracy or just in general, you're more than welcome to do so before we close off this lunch and learn.
And I'll put my email in the chat if anybody, you know, has any questions that come up later on, or you want to reach out. Great.
All right, thank you, Tracy, for sharing your email. And then as a lunch and learn tradition, we typically end off with a group photo. So if you're comfortable with sharing your screen, you're more than welcome to do so. And then I'll count us off and take a group screenshot. So if you're not sharing your, oh, and then Joan said, thank you, Tracy, for sharing the reality of Luke's college experience. You're a wonderful advocate. Is your session recorded so I can share with colleagues? Yes, this is being recorded. It should be up on the Autism Tree YouTube channel tomorrow.
Thank you, Jen.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then thank you for sharing your screen. I will count us off. All right, 1, 2, 3. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today's Lunch and Learn, and thank you, Tracy, for sharing your story and Luke's story.
Thank you, everyone, for spending this time watching me cry.
Take care. Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.